This is the introductory guide to Booklet 7 of the GCSE Germany course at Plymstock School concerning opposition to Hitler and the Nazis. From booklets 4 through to 6, students have been studying just how successful Hitler was in establishing a totalitarian state and the way in which he gained support for the Nazi totalitarian state. In booklet 7, students are starting to interrogate the limits of his success. We have seen from previous lessons that Nazi Germany was a totalitarian state, which aimed to control not only people's actions but also their thoughts. Using both propaganda and terror, the regime aimed to unite everyone in Germany behind their leader. But with what success did people resist and the Nazis succeed? As students work through this booklet, 3 questions from past papers are provided as examples of the standard to which students should be working to. How successful was Hitler in establishing a totalitarian state? Why was there so little opposition to Hitler and the Nazis? How and with what success did Germans oppose the Nazis? As with all other booklets in this course, the resources in this booklet are supported by resources online at www.historynetwork.co.uk, follow the link to the Germany page, iPod and DVD and reading resources that can also be accessed either through the aforementioned website or through the History School area. Lesson 1 involves the students looking at the nature of opposition. They are asked to look at 10 different examples of resistance, ranging from level 4 to the highest level, level 1. Now, as we go through this booklet, we will provide the students with 2 different ways in which they can attempt to quantify the level of resistance that individuals were showing. In this case, level 4 is simply private grumbling. 3 is passive resistance, simply a failure to fully cooperate. Level 2 is underground resistance and open opposition, actively seeking out like-minded individuals. Very difficult in a society where informing was common practice. And finally, number 1, the attempt to actually overthrow the regime, a coup d'etat or a putsch, as we've used in booklet 1 as an example. That most famously is the July bomb plot of 1944. Students therefore in this first activity are required to read the 10 examples and then identify with a tick 1, 2, 3 or 4 the level of resistance that is being identified in their sources according to their opinion. The final column we will come back to in a later activity when we introduce a different way of grading the resistance. Task 2 requires the students to simultaneously place on this opinion line where they think each of the 10 examples rate in terms of the level of resistance that's being demonstrated. And task 3 gets the students to reflect upon those 10 examples and all the previous work that they've done in booklets 4 through to 6 to consider how far Hitler had established a totalitarian regime so far. Task 4 then requires them to watch a 40-minute film called The Wave and ask them to consider from the film set in America in the 1980s this concept of why it was easier for the Germans to follow rather than to oppose the Nazis. If students wish to access this film again, they can do so from the school shared area. Task 5 requires the students to consolidate their spider diagram from the film and summarise in their own words why resistance was so rare in Germany. Lesson 2. Further exploring what is the nature of resistance. How do we define resistance and opposition? Why did so few people resist? And why was Hitler never really the focus of people's anger? Throughout the course, we've introduced students to different techniques whereby they can discover and get an insight into what best works for them in terms of their own personal learning. We've done storyboarding, grids, spider diagrams. This is an approach and a technique that is often useful for looking at extended pieces of writing. Whenever students are asked to make notes, it's very important that they are aware of what they're making notes on. When looking at resistance today, we're looking at the 5 points that are listed down here on the side. Who resisted? Why did people resist? How did people resist? Why did people not resist? And why was Hitler rarely the focus of their anger? It's from an academic text as noted down here in the provenance, and students are to allocate each one of these key questions a separate colour and then skim read the text. and it's an interesting insight into how students best work. Do students look at one question and go through the text, or are students prepared to multitask and look at several themes at any one time and go through and highlight as they go? Any keywords have been underlined, and a glossary of keywords is available here at the bottom. From that text, students are to synthesize down their notes to no more than 100 words to answer those 5 questions that were the themes that they've highlighted the text for. These 5 questions here. In doing so, they demonstrate their ability to write in a concise manner. Brevity is a skill in itself. Moving on. Now, why was there so little serious opposition inside Nazi Germany? A question phrased in the classic GCSE style. Why was there so little serious opposition? Students will be required in this activity to come up with 3 reasons why there was so little serious opposition. Around this spider diagram are identified 6. Using page 91 of the textbook, students are being asked to write in each of these boxes a PEA paragraph. For example, fear was a reason why there was so little serious opposition. Evidence to support this is explain the reasons that students are aware of how fear operated in Nazi Germany. And analysis, this explains why there was so serious little opposition, because. One example is provided over here. I would suspect that many students should be able, through their own prior learning, to fill out many of those boxes and only return to page 91 for guidance when they are genuinely stuck. Task 4 then introduces the second means by which we measure resistance. And in doing this, we use the German historian Katie Bracher's definition. Now, he ranks resistance from 1 to 3, the lowest being passive resistance, the lack of cooperation, active resistance, seeking out others, and thirdly, overt resistance, participating in direct action, using force against the Nazis. Using these 3 definitions, as listed here in Task 4, students are then required to go back to the original 10 examples of resistance and define these under the type heading. So students now have 2 different ways in which they can define the quantity of resistance going on inside Nazi Germany. The first being this listed here, 1 to 4, and secondly, Bracher's identified down here. Lesson 3 requires students to look at the role of the church and religion and their part in resistance. Now, a theme as we go through this activity is this notion that in a totalitarian state, no man can have 2 masters. Hitler has to balance a careful act, walking between the fact he cannot eliminate religion from the lives of German people, who were actively very keen churchgoers, but nor can he have the church potentially curb his power. If Hitler wants to go to war and the church believes in peace, there's a clash of ideas. So no man can have 2 masters. Therefore, what Hitler needs to do with the church is Nazify it, but in a way that is seen to be non-threatening, is done slowly and done subtly. By getting the church on side, they legitimize and reinforce his power. So as we go through this booklet, what was the Nazi view on religion? What different churches existed in Nazi Germany, because Germany was split clearly between Catholics and Protestants? And how did the Nazis change religion in Germany? Then students work through a series of resources and activities to understand these key questions. So, task 1, based upon your learning from last lesson, complete the following table. We have a series of examples here. Place these examples into the table correctly. This pulls together their knowledge of the 2 different types of resistance and starts to give them some examples to support this. Task 2 is a back-to-back activity, a different learning style, getting students to think and contemplate about the benefits of working and maybe revising with other people. And the resources that students are using for this can all be found on the shared area. And as students work through this activity, They are asked to think about why religion, how important was religion in Germany, why was religion a threat to the Nazis, and what did the Nazis do to religion in Germany. I'd like to take this opportunity to direct students back to the website www.historynetwork.co.uk and follow the section to the Germany link, and then go down to Booklet 7, Opposition to the Nazis, where there is a link to a page which will explain Nazi policy on religion should they not have the resources that they used in the class. Task 4 is some reflection on that activity. Lesson 4, further looking at the role of Nazism, opposition and the church. Task 1 being a simple closed gap fill activity. As students do that, they can think and reflect upon just how much information they can take in at any one time. If this is too much, then obviously they shouldn't be making notes and attempting to revise from something similar. And they will use the textbook to work through this particular activity. All of these different headings here can be looked up through the school website. Lesson 5 requires students to look at key individuals and organisations that resisted. We have anagrams down here of the key organisations. And down here, the students are expected to make brief notes on the organisation, what they were about, the level of resistance and their risk that they posed to the Nazis. And they are ranking those from 1 being low to 10 being high. From that activity, task 3 gets them to consider, who do you think the Nazis would have perceived as being the biggest threat? Lesson 6, Operation Valkyrie, the July bomb plot. What was Valkyrie? Why was it carried out? Why did it fail? We normally require students to watch the July bomb plot, an episode from Days That Shook the World. Equally, it's possible that they might watch the Tom Cruise film entitled Valkyrie. Or they can read simply from the textbook and complete the gap fill on this activity, thus completing the booklet.